When it put the slogan, "Democracy dies in darkness," on its front page during the Trump era, the Washington Post cast itself as a defender of facts at a time when the very idea of truth was under assault. But when there's money to be made, that commitment has its limits. Adam has more.
Almost every news organization is committed to telling the public what's really going on, but few, if any, brag about it like the Washington Post.
Knowing helps us decide. Knowing keeps us free.
The government needs to be held accountable.
Yet this week, the Post published a full-page advertisement from Lawrence Gelman, a Texas physician who thinks modern American government is illegitimate.
We're no longer functioning as a constitutional democratic republic.
In that Post ad, Gelman says the 2020 election was illegitimate too, that Joe Biden won through fraud, and that the U.S. Senate should investigate. So how did those baseless claims make it into the Post? The paper tells Beat the Press it takes individual advocacy ads from readers who get wide latitude to exercise their First Amendment rights. Last month, that meant another Gelman ad calling climate change a myth. And last summer, the Post ran this, urging the extradition of a critic of Turkey's authoritarian leader.
You're the biggest newspaper, one of the biggest newspapers in the world, and you're taking an ad from a dictatorship.
Which raises a question. In the future, would the Post run an ad boosting the deranged QAnon conspiracy theory, or this call for President Trump to declare martial law and hold the election again? Asked about those examples, the Post declined comment, which seems like a definite maybe.
You know, Adam, there's no law that says they have to carry those kinds of ads. So they clearly did it, for monetary reasons. I cannot believe that Marty Barron, the editor down there, is too happy about this. And as you point out, what's the end game? And would they take NAMBLA? What organization would they not take if they would take this nutty conspiracy stuff? I mean, it's very distressing.
The good news for people who are worried about the examples that we just cited from Lawrence Gelman is that his ads are terribly designed. You don't know, looking through the paper, what he's talking about. You have to dig into minute text, which I think very few people are going to do. They're not well created as far as purveying misinformation. But I do think we're in a moment where, as we've talked about week after week, there are some really insane ideas that are no longer fringe, that are actually somewhat mainstream in terms of how many people ascribe to them. And I don't know that the Post has a policy on the books that would prevent, for example, a QAnon ad. Mm-hmm. You talked about money. There was an article written about Lawrence Gelman's climate change ad in which the author said that he'd spent $25,000 on that. So that's a nice, quick hit when it comes to revenue. $25,000 on that, $25,000 on this fraudulent election thing. But I can't imagine, as you said, that anyone who works at the Post on the journalistic side is happy about this.
No.
Well, one of the examples that Adam gave, his hypothetical about should we overthrow the government, that ad actually did appear in the Washington Times, which is kind of the right-wing competitor to the Washington Post. The thing that I found the most shocking about this, and I don't mean to sound cynical, is how cheap this ad was. He claims that he paid $25,000 for it. Not that many years ago, it cost $500,000 to buy a full-page ad in the Los Angeles Times. And that just really shows you how unimportant the print edition has become to the Washington Post as a business, which, again, makes you wonder why they accepted this ad in the first place. They can run it if they want. It's a little bit of money. But ultimately, it comes down to their brand and reputation. And I think that this hurts their brand and reputation because they have some responsibility for everything they publish.
Well, Dan, I agree with you completely. And that's really why I think it's a little easy and disingenuous for them to say, oh, we've got this policy. Someone gives us the money. We run the ad. I'm quite certain that there is a line that they would not cross because the damage to their brand would be so complete and so irrevocable. I mean, there are people out there who for years, when I was in my college newspaper, there was a Holocaust denial group that went around to college papers submitting an ad and saying, oh, free speech, and kind of putting these young college journalists in this spot where they thought they might have an obligation to run an ad, which of course they don't. You have editorial. It's a business. You have the opportunity to make choices. if someone like that came to the Washington Post, I would be shocked if the Post went and ran that ad. So there is a standard. They need to be honest about what the standard is and the fact that they are making editorial choices, even on the advertising pages.
So here's where I bring up my constant refrain. Free speech does not mean you get to do whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want, with no consequences. Freedom of speech means that the government isn't the one attacking you or preventing you from expressing your thoughts. It doesn't mean you get to run an ad in the Washington Post whenever you want. That said, I think that there's usually a pretty thick wall between the advertising side and the editorial side, and I would be shocked if the editorial side knew that the advertising side was accepting this before it ran in the paper. So that the problem there is people see something in the Washington Post and assume it's been vetted by editorial or it's contradicting editorial, when really editorial probably didn't see it until the readers did. That said, I think there is a line somewhere, and I think it needs to be a little clearer. I don't think it's right to just be able to pay $25,000 or, $500,000 and put something that is demonstrably false into the media. I don't think that shows a lack of bias on the part of the publication. I think it shows a lack of responsibility.
Right. Democracy dies in darkness. Adam, who did you speak to? Somebody in marketing or PR or communications?
It was a Post spokeswoman. I can't remember her name. I think I remember it, but I don't want to try and get it wrong here on air.
She must have been dealing with this question all week. I mean, she.
Yeah, I think the question the statement that she provided to us, it was verbatim what she provided to Pointer, where Tom Jones, I believe, first drew attention to this. And then when I asked her about these other, I had asked her, why'd you run the ad and what about these other examples? She ignored the second question in her initial response. When I tried again, she said, we have nothing else to share at this time. So.
We stick by our story.